This is Summer Lynn from Chicago, Illinois. Just wanted to give a huge shout out to the Relay for all the love and support they've given my team and I. And make sure you stay tuned for all the latest boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, as a result of yesterday's lightweight mega match, we come to a separate part of the conversation, a part of the conversation I'm sure that all of you out there have been arguing about amongst yourselves. Teofimo Lopez has effectively unseated Vasyl Lomachenko as the lightweight division's king, regardless of your scorecard or mine, who you think really deserved the fight, which rounds and when. Teofimo Lopez has established himself as the most dominant force in the lightweight division, and per the rules that govern this pound-for-pound list, the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, Vasyl Lomachenko has effectively been bumped off the list per the rules that govern it, moving Kazuto Ioka up one spot, Leo Santa Cruz one spot, opening the door for Teofimo Lopez to emerge in the number 8 spot of the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, ahead of Juan Francisco Estrada and Jermell Charlo. The saving grace for both of these fighters is, well, it comes to Juan. If Juan should manage to unseat Chocolatito, unify world titles with him in the super flyweight division, he will advance ahead of Teofimo Lopez, as he would have been a champion in more weight classes already than Teofimo, and effectively beaten more active reigning world champions than Teofimo. When it comes to Jermell, it's a little bit dicier. If Jermell manages to unify the 154-pound division and become its undisputed champion by beating Patrick Teixeira or the winner of Teixeira versus Castaño, if it happens that way, it does get a bit contentious. There actually is an argument for Jermell to be ranked ahead of Teofimo Lopez. In that scenario, Jermell Charlo would have essentially beaten 3 active reigning world champions to Teofimo Lopez's 2. And in Jermell's situation, unlike Teofimo, there's no question as to whether or not he would be that division's undisputed champion, as he would be in possession of all of the world titles. Emphasis on world titles, not designations like the franchise French fry designation that Teofimo won from Vasyl Lomachenko yesterday. And that's saying that even if you scored it for Teofimo Lopez and you feel that he legitimately won the fight, you're in full agreement with the judges' scorecards. When it comes to his status as a WBC champion, he's not a WBC world champion. He's a WBC franchise champion. And there is a question as to whether or not franchise status can be obtained and contested between Teofimo and a challenger. We know that the WBC allowed Teofimo to be able to fight for and win that status against Vasyl Lomachenko, the then franchise champion. But moving forward, now that Teofimo is a franchise champion himself, by way of the WBC, he will not have mandatories that will challenge him for that title. And that's the difference between a world champion and a franchise champion. It's not the same thing.
By definition, it's not.
As in the case of Jermell Charlo, if he either fights Patrick Teixeira and unifies all the belts in that division, or he fights the winner of Teixeira versus Castaño and fights the winner of that fight, unifies all the titles that way, there's no question as to whether or not he would be the undisputed world champion of his prescribed weight class. There are no contentions and no designations to scrutinize and mull over. Thus, there might actually be an argument in that scenario for Jermell to advance ahead of Teofimo Lopez. That is, unless before that comes to pass, Teofimo moves up to 140 pounds and by some chance becomes a champion there. That would keep Teofimo ahead of Jermell Charlo in the pound-for-pound rank standings. You know, I've seen a lot of reactions to last night's fight. A lot of reactions to Teofimo Lopez's victory over Vasyl Lomachenko. A lot of would-be praise that really, at least to me, reads as something else. There are those out there who are already saying that Vasyl Lomachenko was a hype job, that he was never really any good, and that Teofimo Lopez put that on full display by, quote-unquote, outboxing him. If I had a fucking nickel for every time I heard some slack-jawed idiot use a buzzword like outboxed, I'll tell you what, I'd be a very rich man. Better still, a lot of this would-be praise isn't actually praise for Teofimo Lopez at all. Oh, don't get me wrong. Teofimo has his supporters. He has all his guys that are all the way to the left.
His fanboys.
The same as Vasil Lomachenko has his guys who are all the way to the right.
His fanboys.
And getting to the middle of it, calling it down the middle, especially in this sport, is quite elusive. But a lot of this would be praise. It isn't praise for Teofimo Lopez at all. It's not. If your initial reaction to Teofimo Lopez's victory last night is to simply state that Vasil Lomachenko isn't very good and he was exposed and Teofimo Lopez put that on full display, you're not praising Teofimo Lopez for what he did. And what he did was beat a two-time Olympic gold medalist who became a 3-division champion in professional boxing after only 15 professional fights. If you can be aware of these facts and stats, these statistics, and still consider Vasil Lomachenko any kind of a hype job, it's clear that you're not praising Teofimo Lopez for beating a highly skilled fighter. You're just using Teofimo to bash a guy who you were already bashing because you didn't like him. And for whatever reason you didn't like him, it ain't got a hell of a lot to do with boxing. Let me tell you. So much of what is being said exposes the true nature of the individual. Because in reality, the best way to look at Teofimo Lopez's victory over Vasil Lomachenko is that he beat the odds and he beat the man to be the man. But if you never thought that Vasil Lomachenko was the man in the first fucking place, then you're not praising Teofimo for what he did, not by diminishing Vasil Lomachenko. All that is getting behind the latest guy, just the latest guy you decided to get behind so that you could keep berating the same fighter. This is what I've seen year by year from the usual suspects, the ones who got behind Nicholas Walters and the ones who subsequently moved on from Nicholas Walters to Guillermo Rigondeaux, the guys who deprived Vasil Lomachenko of doing what they thought he couldn't do because they didn't think he could beat Rigo.
It's the same fucking people.
And in that way, some of the comments that you're reading don't actually have a whole lot to do with Teofimo Lopez or him beating Vasil Lomachenko. It's more to do with the already pre-existing bias some individuals had against that particular fighter. I want to say that even though I didn't score the fight for Teofimo, I didn't score it for Vasil Lomachenko either. I think that both guys put some high-level skills on display in yesterday's fight, which I scored as a draw. That means that while neither guy won, neither guy lost either. But if there is praise to be dispensed for Teofimo Lopez, it's for exhibiting the kind of courage that we don't often see in postmodern boxing. A guy who really believes in himself and is backing himself against someone who is favored to beat him.
Teofimo beat the odds.
That's why I'm not in too much of an uproar over the judges' scorecards, which in my heart of hearts I feel were far too wide in favor of Teofimo Lopez. Ultimately, there are always going to be discrepancies between how the fans see a fight and how the judges see a fight. But in spite of this, there is still that which needs to be praised when it comes to Teofimo Lopez, regardless of how you scored it. That which needs to be praised and appreciated in this kid.
Regardless of the judges.
Ultimately, I scored the fight a draw because Vasil Lomachenko didn't start trying to win this thing till it's far too late. But too late for my tastes. So I don't see a robbery here. I just don't see the lopsided match that the judges scoring the fight saw, or what some of these disingenuous boxing fans saw. The ones that are using Teofimo Lopez as a means to keep doing what they've been doing, and that's berating Vasil Lomachenko. For some, this outcome raises certain questions. Two in particular. Was Vasil Lomachenko a hype job all along? Was there never any substance to this fighter? Because he went out there and he did look lost in the sauce for at least the early goings of this fight. He didn't decide to start trying to win it until it was a bit too late to win it. And to that question, I would say that, no, he's not a hype job. I mean, you can't win 2 Olympic gold medals and be a hype job. You can't win over 300 amateur fights and be a hype job, subsequently move on to the professional ranks and become a 3-division champion in under 15 fights if you're a hype job. Hype in and of itself will not get you those accomplishments. So no, Vasil Lomachenko was not a hype job, but what he was a tad bit overrated. Understand that Vasil Lomachenko has the same kind of over-enthusiastic, overzealous fanboys that we see here today crowding around Teofimo Lopez, you know? Loma had bandwagoners the same way that Teofimo's now got bandwagoners. And these are the guys who ranked him as the number one pound-for-pound fighter ahead of all others, even those who were more accomplished as professionals than he was. You know, the highest Vasyl Lomachenko ever got on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list was number 2, and that was a long time ago.
Years.
Since that time, many other fighters added many other accomplishments to their resumes, to their records, to their legacies. And Vasyl Lomachenko, like some others, lost some ground. Before yesterday's fight, Vasyl Lomachenko was ranked at, I don't know what, number 6?
On my list.
Behind Naoya Inoue, behind Terrence Crawford, behind Chocolatito, behind Canelo Alvarez, and behind Manny Pacquiao, all of which have more career accomplishments than Vasyl Lomachenko. And that doesn't diminish Lomachenko as a fighter. He's still very skilled, still very accomplished, but there were those out there who vehemently ranked him as the number one pound-for-pound most skilled fighter in the world. And in that way, those individuals and some pundits, some popular periodicals out there, they did overrate this fighter a bit.
In effect, polarizing him as a fighter.
A fighter being overrated, simply stated, does not mean that that fighter isn't a good fighter or a highly skilled fighter. It doesn't mean that Vasyl Lomachenko wasn't a pound-for-pound top 10 guy. What it means is too many people were rushing to crown him as the number one pound-for-pound guy. And as it stands, he's never been number one on my list. I don't know about yours. So where does this fighter go from here? And does he stand a chance of becoming a full-fledged world champion or unified champion again? Well, that depends. Teofimo Lopez's stay in the lightweight division is over. He plans on moving up, so whatever titles he won last night are titles that in the very near future could become vacant. Vasyl Lomachenko still possesses enough skill, and there's enough time on his side that he could become a world champion at this weight again. Yeah, it's possible. You're talking about 4 separate world titles that in the near future could become available, even if Vasyl Lomachenko doesn't get a rematch with Teofimo Lopez. And yes, it is possible that he could pick one of those world titles up and maybe be reintegrated into the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list again. Or perhaps not in the top 3, maybe not the top 5, but the top 10. Because he is still a very accomplished professional boxer. There are still fights out there that can be made. Vasyl Lomachenko versus Javier Fortuna, Vasyl Lomachenko versus Devin Haney, Vasyl Lomachenko at some point versus the winner of Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell. Maybe he'll fight Ryan at some point. No time soon, I'm sure, but at some point. Or maybe he'll have a rematch with Luke. I mean, it's anybody's guess. But the book isn't completely closed on Vasyl Lomachenko altogether. The guy's, what, 32? Not 39. He ain't pushing 40.
Did the time off hurt him?
Perhaps it did. You're talking about a fighter who's a very physically gifted fighter, an athletic fighter, who did not have to use that athleticism for over 12 months' time. What was it, 14, 15 months of inactivity? Surely that had some role in all of this, in unison with Teofimo's skills and how formidable he is as a fighter, how difficult he was to read for Vasyl Lomachenko in the early goings of this match. Surely Teofimo Lopez's speed, size, punching power, ring IQ, ring savvy had its role to play in all of this as well. I see a lot of people rushing to extremes and rushing to exclude certain particulars from the conversation when all these particulars, all these details had their role to play in last night's fight. And last night's fight, in spite of not going Vasyl Lomachenko's way, does not mean that the sun has completely set for this fighter. He could very well see himself fighting the winner of Valdez versus Burchelt. And a fight like that could end up being for a vacant title. Another opportunity for Vasyl Lomachenko to once again be crowned a world champion. Boxing fans themselves, whilst attempting to be analytical in their observations, are often quite emotional, thus often rushing to extremes, too far to the left, too far to the right, too far off the deep end to appear as anything but partial, though they themselves like to think of themselves as being impartial. Of course, the Teofimo Lopez fans, who were already Teofimo Lopez fans, scored the fight wide in his favor. And of course, Vasyl Lomachenko's fanboys, those bandwagoners, of course they're screaming robbery right now, when the truth is, as far as I saw it, nobody won the fight, but nobody lost the fight. The judges themselves decided to give it to Teofimo Lopez, and for his courage, I salute him. Not angry that he won the fight. In fact, it might be better for Top Rank that that he won the fight, as he has more upside and more time on his side than Vasyl Lomachenko. It can't hurt them at all to have a young, fresh-faced fighter like Teofimo Lopez achieving big things in the sport of boxing.
That's gotta be good for the brand.
Good for the franchise, and what's good for the goose has got to be good for the gander.
What does that mean?
I'm not quite sure, but it fits well at the end of a sentence. And for Top Rank, having a young, fresh-faced fighter like Teofimo Lopez beating the odds, upsetting the plans, upsetting the established order, draws that much more attention to the sport in the process. Listen, had Vasyl Lomachenko went in there and beat this young guy who only had 15 professional fights, it wouldn't have gotten the same reaction that Teofimo is now getting for having upset the balance, upset the plans for what is a very decorated amateur boxer and professional.
It wouldn't.
It wouldn't have meant the same things. If Vasyl Lomachenko had beaten Teofimo, that's more or less what myself and several others expected to happen. But it's that air of spontaneity. It's when the unexpected happens. Teofimo Lopez winning the fight, not just winning the fight, but winning a decision.
I wasn't expecting that.
I, like many others, expected that if Teofimo Lopez had an out to win this fight, it would be by way of knockout, and it would be by way of knockout early while he's still fresh and he's still got something left in the tank. I didn't imagine that he'd go 12 rounds with Vasyl Lomachenko and still manage to somehow win a decision. That air of spontaneity creates excitement in the sport. And right now, the sport needs excitement because you got a lot of fights that don't mean nothing to nobody.
No one.
Very soon, Gervonta Davis is going to be fighting Leo Santa Cruz. Nobody was asking for that fucking fight.
Are you excited to see that fucking fight?
Yeah, get out of here with that bullshit. And for everyone else out there, man, everybody's is cherry picking. Gervonta Davis, why are you fighting Leo Santa Cruz? For what? That's a 130 pounder or a 126 pounder. That's sad, man. And you guys hype these guys up for so many things, but it's okay. It's okay. Just put them in front of me and I'll beat them.
That's the kind of attitude that got this kid attention. That's the kind of attitude that makes fight fans excited about what could happen, what fights could be made available to us, because this kid's the real fucking deal. He's the genuine article. He's not faking the funk like Gervonta Davis. He's not being hidden away from what challenges are out there. Teofimo Lopez was willing to fight the guy that Gervonta Davis didn't want no parts of for 3 years. So I'm not mad that he got the decision. I'm willing to say and willing to admit that it's good for boxing that Teofimo Lopez won.